Hey everybody, Tony D with one last hot take, and this is my third prediction for Civil War 2. So, my other predictions for Civil War were wrong, but, as a screenwriter, I like to project and use my imagination to see what will happen. So, in this case, what I think could happen is the cities starting, these weeks could get so out of hand that people flee them, right? And then with the food and the food chains already sort of a little shaky, people in the major cities, combined with all the damage and the lack of police force and whatnot, are forced to flee because there's no food, there's no way to get food, and so people just start leaving the cities. Now, they're abandoned to these Antifa, and they turn into a bunch of roving gangs who at first loot the rest of the stores, the remaining stores, and then they start looting homes. And when they run out of places to loot in the city, they do eventually go to the suburbs to loot those houses. But by the time they do that, those suburbs start setting up defenses. Now, some of them don't, because some of them don't believe this is really happening. Some of them are super liberal and they don't believe in guns, and they're going to be just fine because they're going to call the cops, but the cops aren't coming, or they only got a handful of cops. And so slowly we start to see things unravel. And on the one side, we've got sort of guerrilla warfare coming from the Antifa guys. And on the other side, we've got the U.S. government. And they overplay their hand. Maybe they shoot too many people, and they kind of turn the general public against them a little bit because they shoot too many people. I kind of think it won't happen, but the media keeps squawking about how overreaction it is, and we can't get any real news. Maybe that could happen to the point where, people who lose their homes instantly end up joining the Antifa movement because there's just no place to get food or anywhere else. So they've been cooped up, and so their ranks just swell and swell and swell. So it becomes a civil war, and on one side, you've got the teeming masses, teeming unwashed hipsters who are starving and are just, they just mass raid stores on the outskirts in order to survive. And on the other side, you've got these army guys who are trying to protect their own country, but they're reluctant to shoot, the looters. But over time, they get more comfortable with it, and it just becomes an S show, right? And because the army's stretched so thin because they're all overseas, eventually Trump maybe brings back the Afghani forces, not the Afghanis, but the forces in Afghanistan, and they end up doing, domestic patrols. And we end up in a situation where we're occupied by our own armies in order to maintain order. And roving gangs of these Antifa control these desolate, burned out cities that no longer function, that no one can protect. The buildings are falling apart. There's no water. It goes back and forth. There's some water and there's some food and there's some sections that are kind of marginally functional, but as their supplies dwindle, their forces dwindle. Because these are just college kids, they can't really survive this. But some of them get hardened. So there's like a hardcore base of these guerrillas, like guerrilla warfare, not guerrillas like gorillas in the mist, guerrilla warfare. So they're out there, and a few of them get guns, but they're not really good at using them. So a lot of them get killed, but a handful of them get better at it. And a handful of them are like ex-Marines, let's say, or veterans. So they get some training because they genuinely believe that the U.S. government is out to kill them and caused all this, and they're just radicalized beyond belief. So there's no, it's like those right-wing militias, except now we have left-wing militias. And it never really turns into a full-blown civil war. It just turns into roaming gangs that we never can quite eliminate, because there are groups of people who still believe they're kind of the good guys, so they hide them, and then, Trump is forced to put more and more draconian measures on them and on us in general in order to root them out. So anyone caught, giving comfort to the enemy is thrown in jail too, but sometimes you don't even know, and you end up giving a cup of coffee to a rando, and then it turns out he's in an Antifa cell organization, and you get thrown in jail because you gave the guy a cup of coffee. It could turn into something like that. But I don't see it as being like Antifa storms the White House. You know how fortified the White House is? They got bulletproof glass. They got a missile battery on the roof of the White House, I think. They got machine guns to beat the band. Secret Service will murder you. Okay? They will murder you if you jump that fence. They've got sharpshooters. I guarantee you, they've got a bunch of sharpshooters on the roof of the White House, and they will start popping heads. Pop, pop, pop. If you rush that White House. Do not rush the White House. You are not going to get a Trump. He is going to escape, and many people will be killed. It is not a fantasy. This is not the storming of the Bastille. This is not the French Revolution. This is not the Soviet Union's revolution. This is not a revolution. This is you being idiots. So don't do that. And maybe we won't have a civil war too. I tell you what would really set off a civil war too, I think, is if somehow Biden won and there was any indication that they cheated. And if this mail-in voting goes and somehow gives Biden the election, that's a civil war. That's a civil war right there. Because I think the Trump supporters would finally get off and say, and the Trump supporters all got guns, by the way. They all have guns. 99% of them have guns, and they're practicing how to use them. So, I did an anti-war comic about, the left versus the right in the Civil War, and the war lasted 3 minutes because the left's army is just a ragtag group of college kids with pink hair and, a handful of veterans, but most of these idiots, they don't have guns. They don't believe in guns. They believe in gun control. And everybody on the right is either a policeman or a vet or just somebody who knows how to use a gun. And, a Civil War II would be very, very short indeed, I think, if it actually happened. But I don't know if it's going to happen that way. I think, it is just a mess. And it's fine to speculate about it, but I'm really hoping, like a lot of you out there, that this just ends. This just ends and we go back to some level of normalcy. And I don't mean Joe Biden, because Joe Biden ain't normalcy. That guy's off his nut, in my opinion. So I just would like maybe a few weeks of normal. If this terrible tragedy has done one thing, it's knocked the beer virus off the front page of the news. Suddenly nobody cares about it. Suddenly social distancing, face mask. Oh yeah, we used to do that. Not during these riots, you didn't. Mostly these people are wearing masks because they don't want to be identified, not because they give a crap about the virus. I think the virus is going away. I think because it's been pushed off the front page, you watch. I think the forces that wanted the beer virus to be Trump's downfall are now going to let that fall off the front page, and suddenly the virus, we're on to the next thing. We're on to the next thing. Oh, right, Trump is a racist. We forgot. So maybe that's Civil War II. Yeah, the people in other countries must think we're out of our minds.